Okay. Um, so thank you again, Dr. Boswell, for taking the time to give us such an excellent educational presentation today. I hope that everyone was able to get some takeaway from this. We're also, again, I'm going to reiterate that we're recording the session and we'll be putting it up on our website as an educational video. I also want to remind our attendees today that we do offer Dr. Boswell's book, The Ultimate Guide for Horses in Need, on our website. And it is at a discount for UHC members, so be sure to check that out. So for our final discussion for the day, we will be having asking the experts a panel discussion on responsible ownership, and where we'll basically be gaining some insight into the different perspectives of the expectations that various service providers have when working with new and prospective horse buyers and adopters in an effort to better prepare the owners for responsible horse ownership. So with that, what I'm going to do is do the introductions, get those out of the way for our panelists today. We have with us today Dr. David Ramey, who's a 1983 graduate of the Colorado State University School of Veterinary Medicine. Following graduation, Dr. Ramey completed an internship in equine medicine and surgery at Iowa State University. He entered private equine practice in Southern California in 1984 and set up his own ambulatory clinical practice, Ramey Equine, in 1987. Dr. Ramey's practice is limited to the care and treatment of sport and pleasure horses. He cares for a diverse group of horses, from top-level hunters, jumpers, and dressage horses to pleasure horses and miniature horses. In addition to being a full-time practitioner, Dr. Ramey is also an internationally recognized researcher, author, lecturer, and blogger. He has written 14 books, 5 book chapters, and has had over 70 papers published in professional journals. He has lectured on various topics in universities, expos, and conventions around the United States, as well as Canada, Australia, and the UK. And he has presented at the annual American Association of Equine Practitioners Convention 10 times. He blogs on Facebook at Dr. David Ramey, DVM, and has nearly 50,000 followers around the world. So welcome, Dr. Ramey.
Thank you.
Glad to have you today. Next up is going to be Christy Lambier, Chief Executive Officer for Certified Horsemanship Association, a nonprofit 501c3 association whose purpose is to promote excellence in safety throughout the equine industry, and has been active in the horse industry for over 35 years. She is a master level riding instructor for an equine facility manager through the Certified Horsemanship Association, CHA, and has been teaching children and adults across multiple disciplines how to ride for over the past 30 years. Past president of the American Youth Horse Council and past board member for the Colorado Horse Council. She also founded, competed on, and coached the University of Colorado at Boulder Intercollegiate Horse Show Association equestrian team, and continues to stay involved with the Colorado State University. She is an AQHA and APHA professional horseman on the AQHA National Marketing Committee and the APHA Professional Horseman Committee. And she's the current treasurer for the Interscholastic Equestrian Association Board. Her other experiences range from the sponsorship and youth programs manager for the Arabian Horse Association, a trainer for Skill Path seminars, and the development director for the urban farm that works with at-risk youth in Denver. She's also a certifier and site accreditor for the organization, and does facilitation and meditation through her company, CJL Training Incorporated, for organizations such as Real Colors Personality Trainer. So welcome, Christy.
Thank you, Ashley. Pleasure to be here.
Don't
And
forget
then
to
we
change the
also-
slide, Ash.
What was that?
Don't forget to change the slide.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Pregnancy brain, I swear. So there's Christy. And then next up we have Karen Gustin from from the Kentucky Equine Adoption Center in Nicholasville, Kentucky. She's been the executive director there since April of 2012. The KYEAC is an all-breed horse rescue and shelter that takes in horses that are surrendered because of abuse, neglect, abandonment, or whose owners can no longer care for them because of finances or physical health issues. The center handles over 100 horses each year. In addition to general horse care, the KYEAC also runs 2 education programs called Take the Reins, geared towards elementary and high school, and Support a Special Horse, geared towards first-time horse owners. The KYEAC also conducts an equine assisted learning program called the Heads Up, Hearts Open. And Kentucky Equine Adoption Center is certified as an equine rescue in the state of Kentucky, accredited through the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance and the Global Federation for Animal Sanctuaries. Prior to this, Karen worked for over 30 years for the National Park Service. Her last position as superintendent was at Olympic National Park in Washington State. As superintendent, she managed a park almost 1 million acres in size, with over 100 full-time employees and 200 part-time employees, and a budget of over 13 million. Karen holds her BS from Colorado State University and Senior Executive Service Candidate Development Program, Department of the Interior. She is also a member of the United Horse Coalition, Retired Racehorse Project, and the Right Horse Initiative Partner. And also sitting in on this panel, we will have Dr. Boswell, who we've already given an introduction to. So welcome to our panelists, and thank you for being here with us today to give your insight. So with that, I'm going to ask our first question for the panel today. And that is, outside of finances, what do you like owners to have in place before they acquire a horse as it relates to the services that you provide? I think what we'll do is we'll start with Dr. Rami, and we'll just go through the way we did the introductions, if that's all right with everyone.
Great. Well, for me, and this is particularly poignant since I just had this happen yesterday morning at 5 o'clock, is I want my owners to have an emergency place in plan. It's difficult when you see a horse that needs emergency treatment and you say, we need to refer this horse to another provider, to a hospital, and they go, well, how do we do that? So having an emergency care plan, whether it be a group of horse owners that are working together so that they can have you can have a call list of people to call, is super important, both in cases of your own horse's emergency. In Southern California, we have the unpleasant experience of regularly getting our horses exposed to wildfires. So in case of evacuation, you need to have an emergency plan in order to be able to move your horse. Now, if you can afford a trailer, that's fantastic. But at the very least, keep a list of haulers, friends that have horses, so that if you need it, you've got it right then and there, and you don't have to look for it.
Thank you. And that brings us to, I'm forgetting.
Christy.
I think I'm next, Ashley. I'll just jump right in.
I'm struggling.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm representing a bunch of our riding instructors who also happen to be horse trainers. I sent out these questions to them weeks ago, and I've kind of compiled not just the Christy Landwehr way, but what a bunch of other people are doing around the country. So one of the biggest things that they said for this question was a network. You have to have, before you get the horse, a network of people to support you, of which one, of course, is your veterinarian. Another one, of course, is a farrier. Another one is hopefully a reputable and good boarding barn with a good barn manager who's going to be able to also answer your questions and help you, and provides good feed and whatnot. Obviously, if the horse is on your property, then knowing people that can help you understand how to keep your horse on your property. And finally, I would not be doing a good job working for Certified Horsemanship if I didn't say a certified equine professional to help you, whether it is an instructor or trainer, and how that trainer is going to go ahead and guide you in your process so that the horse can stay at the level of which you got it, or can be trained if you got it with not much knowledge.
I keep losing my mute button. Thank you, Christy. Okay, next up is Karen.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Ashley. I echo exactly what David and Christy already mentioned. From our standpoint here at the center, the very minimum that we require when people submit their adoption applications is they have to have a veterinarian in place and a farrier in place, and as well as support if they need it, depending on what level of horse ownership they're at. We often get people that are just getting back into horses or don't know a lot about horses. And so we really work with them personally and individually to make sure that they have people that they can go to if they have questions or concerns and they need help, and they can always come back to us, of course. But we require that they have a farrier and a veterinarian in place even before they actually adopt.
It's a thoroughbred mare.
Sometimes they don't even have a horse, and we will accept a small animal veterinarian as a reference, but we ask that they get themselves set up as a client ahead of time. I always tell people, you know, you're not married to that person for the rest of your life, and if you want to change farriers or vets, that's fine, but we want to make sure that they are set up as clients so they aren't scrambling to find those services after they do adopt.
Conference that she's doing, so I'm not sure what that.
The one thing that I might add, and this is as to Christy's point, is I think having a network is really important, but I would encourage horse owners to try to keep that network as small as possible. Because the horse world today is full of so many different competing opinions, recommendations, that especially for a new horse owner, it can be kind of overwhelming. And rather than seek out as many opinions, especially when you're getting started, try to build a small group of people that you can trust and ask advice from, rather than getting everybody's opinion. It's the too many cooks spoil the broth way of thinking.
David, I completely agree with you. And I want to also mention social media is not a good idea. Getting on those Facebook pages for everybody and their mother and asking an opinion about horses, boy, you're going to be very confused, especially if you're brand new in our industry. So I 100% agree with you.
I'm the same.
Yeah, you
thing.
almost need a mentor to help you, guide you through those initial decisions that you have to make as a new horse owner. And I agree that it should be a small group of people.
Dr. Boswell, anything to add to that?
Great. I'm really sorry for that other call too. So, I echo what everybody has said here. We want to have an emergency plan. We want to have a network. We want to have some resources. But I think that it's important. I really want people, when they get their horses, to get to know their horses. So I think they're all individuals. And I am sometimes really, really impressed by somebody who is a total beginner, but they notice something because that horse lives with them at their home and they spend a lot of time watching their horse. So I really want people to bond with their horse and pay attention to their horse, because if we're listening, our horses will tell us. And whether that's a medical issue or whether that is a behavioral issue, I think I really want people to know who their horse is. So just know that horses are prey animals and know how they think a little bit. And so some of that is your network, but also just spend time with your horse so that when something changes, you know that. And so I think, I just think that's what people want to do. That's why we get horses. So, but that actual investment in time and investment in that relationship and knowing what is normal really goes a long way when we start looking for what's abnormal or when we start having behavioral issues and trying to peel off the onion layers to see why this horse is doing whatever it's doing that's not normal. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So next we're going to move on to question number 2. What routine expenses do you think people should plan for as it applies to your service? And what emergency funding should they keep on hand? So I know we talk a lot about owner finances as being a one of the top reasons why horses can become at risk. So this one was sort of an important one for us to emphasize. So we'll just start at the top again with Dr. Ramy.
I did a presentation at the Equine Practitioners Conference a couple of years ago based on a survey that I did through my blog. And I was somewhat pleasantly surprised to find out that routine veterinary care, and this is just routine health care, we're not talking about the middle of the night emergency or anything, but routine veterinary care is actually kind of a minor part of the overall expense of keeping a horse when compared to board and deciding which color blanket is appropriate, or or the various myriad things that horse owners stress about that they spend money on. But unfortunately, horses will have emergencies from time to time, and depending on the emergencies, the costs can be considerable, especially if you get into things like abdominal surgery. So I think it's always a good plan to either have an open credit card or to have I would think at least $1,000 put aside in an emergency fund. Alternatively, depending on the value of the horse and what your thoughts are, you can also get an insurance plan with a relatively nominal fee that will cover a significant amount of medical and surgical costs. I'm not saying that it's necessary for every horse owner to have an emergency or to have an insurance policy on their horse, but it's certainly something that I think an individual horse owner should consider, talk about with their own veterinarian, insofar as preparing for emergency expenditures.
And Ashley, because we say as it applies to your service, I'm not going to jump into obviously the obvious, like you need to feed them and you need to be able to do those things. I'm going to jump into how it relates to a trainer, because that was what you asked me to do today. And from a training perspective, yes, you can hop on your YouTube, and yes, you can buy a DVD, and yes, you can do all these other things and become a self-proclaimed trainer. That's a very bad idea. So it's a very important thing for them to have money set aside for training for the horse, especially if they themselves don't know much. Hopefully the horse came from a reputable place that had trainers on site that were helpful. But if that's not the case and they don't really know much about the horse's background, they're going to have to dive in. And if they dive in, they definitely want to start on the ground. They want to go ahead and bring in somebody to help them on groundwork before they ever get on. They want somebody else to get on the horse before they ever get on the horse. And much to what Dr. Stacy was talking about, that partnership is not necessarily developed between two without a third party there who has more experience and can guide along that journey. So training expenses vary. We do surveys all the time. It can vary from $25 a session all the way up to $150 a session. So certainly having some money set aside for that. We often recommend weekly is the best, but for some that can only afford once a month, if that trainer comes in with a lot of good homework for that person to do, that's super. Now, if they want to put the horse in training, now that's a totally different story. Now that trainer is going to provide board, they're going to provide feed. Now you're talking more like $300 to $750 a month, bare minimum, to get that horse trained, and that includes the board and the training, and it can go upwards of $1,000, all depending on where you go and the part of the country you're in. But there are definitely traveling trainers that will come to you, and if you do have a truck and trailer, you can certainly put that horse in a truck and trailer and go to someone.
So here at the center, we actually ask people in their adoption application how much money they make a year, what their annual income is, and we ask them the question, do you understand that having a horse can, just basically cost upwards of $3,000 plus a year, just so people understand that. But when it comes to routine expenses that people should plan for, obviously, yes, veterinary care, dental care, vaccinations, that kind of thing. But for the lay horse owner, so someone that's not professionally showing or whatever, I think people should be prepared for these basic conditions that involve skin, teeth, horse's feet, and of course colic, because colic can range from mild colic to severe colic that requires surgery. And I think those areas are areas that people should be aware of, will probably routinely off and on cost some money to take care of. I always tell people, well, actually, this is my new motto because it just happened to me, is to be ready for the freak. Because if a horse can do it, it will. And I used to think $1,000 a month, David, was enough in my little emergency pot, but I've upped that to 2,000. I was trail riding in Virginia a month ago with my daughter, and her horse stepped on this log that was laying on the ground, very, unassuming, and a piece of that log flew up and punctured her lower chest, and she ended up in the hospital with a trach and a collapsed lung for almost 10 days. And it was something that we couldn't have prevented short of not doing the ride. And that was an extremely expensive treatment, and she lived, she is alive, but it was just one of those freak things that you could not really anticipate. And so I think for people that own horses, you need to have enough financial resources on hand to at least take care of some of that if you are faced with it. And, we're not professionals. I mean, we ride a lot, but we don't show or breed or race professionally. But those are things that people could easily experience. And financially, you can get in a lot of trouble if you're not ready to take care of that. And fortunately, we were. But it was very stressful. And so we want to help people prepare for that so that they can manage it.
Expect the unexpected.
Yep.
What's going to happen? Stacey, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about this, I mean, money is the main thing here, right? What expenses? But, people also have an emotional budget, and we should really, I'm sure Dr. Ramey has had this experience too, but when we're making end of life decisions based on financial assessment or financial availability, that can get pretty tough. So I think we also, we as horse professionals need to be okay with helping our clients be okay that if something freak happens and we could not have prevented it and we cannot afford to treat it, be okay with saying goodbye to the horse, right? And so, and I don't mean just the veterinary professionals, but the trainers and the farriers as well. When we're all a team in this, and we can say, this is okay, this horse has had a great home for whatever, 10 years. And it'd be great if they all lived to 30, but that isn't realistic. I think keeping in mind that emotional budget as well, and trying to help people, having that $1,000 to $3,000 or having that insurance, yes, and yes. But also, okay, what if we exceed that? Just acknowledging that factor is there is helpful. I appreciate the way that UHC has the resources database. I also just want to mention to the group here, most veterinary hospitals take either care credit or scratch pay. And so people can apply to those on an emergency basis. Unless your credit is terrible, you're going to be able to get some funding there. So just to bring those two up as part of this conversation. I don't think that is the only thing you should have, is like knowing that, but I do think, being aware of all of the resources that could be available should something happen, that's just helpful.
And I'd like to add to Stacy's point that I think that horse owners sometimes get lost in the emotion of difficult situations. And my view is that you have a responsibility to care for the horse. You also have a responsibility to care for yourself and for your family. And so your responsibility to care for the horse, to the extent that you can do that well, is fantastic. But you can't let the horse suffer. And so if by caring for yourself, you stop the horse suffering, that's okay by me. There's in barn situations, there's a lot of guilt that can get heaped on people, and you have to work with your group and make a decision that's best for everybody, which sometimes does mean letting the horse go. And I couldn't agree with you more on that, Stacy. And Karen, as to what you said, I have an observation about horses, and I tell my clients that they are a biological system that is intent on self-destruction, and the only thing they're looking for is an inconvenient time to do it. So.
Yeah, this is the second day into our trail ride, so the rest of the trip did not take place.
Right. So anyway.
And can I just add one thing to that too, Ash? In line with what everybody's saying, and Ashley and I, we've both been adoption counselors, you know, with horses and things like that. And we both own horses, and a consequence of being an owner is eventually having to euthanize at some point. But understanding your plan, your financial limitations for medical care before you get to that point, and having that conversation with your veterinarian as you become a client or before you bring the vet out for emergency treatment. I've been in that scenario. I had a horse end up with a fever and isolation in an equine hospital. And I had to tell the veterinarians when I arrived, I said, there's a $10,000 limit. And you tell them that before it becomes an emotional decision, and understanding your limits and having your plan while it's still a logical decision is really important, I think.
I completely agree with you, Emily and Stacy and David. I think what's so important is establishing a good relationship with your vet, because if they're good vets, they're going to be able to help you make those decisions objectively, but also understand that there's so much emotion involved. And I think counseling people and adopters and new horse owners that, you know, hook up with someone that you really trust and that you really like as a person, and they will help you. And having had this experience and then other experiences here at the center about, you know, how much money are we really going to spend on this horse, helped me personally go into that situation not as emotional as I would have if I hadn't had any of these experiences. And I did have a dollar figure in my mind, just like you, Emily. And I think that's important for people to have ahead of time. Absolutely.
And that dollar figure can vary per horse. I think
Right.
people understand
Yep.
that's okay too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 2-year-olds are different than 30-year-olds.
Yeah. My 30-year-old neurologic horse had a much different dollar
Right.
figure than the 10-year-old
Right.
horse.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you. This has been a good question. Next question for our panelists are, what are the most important aspects of an exit strategy that you'd like to see an owner have in place, preferably before they acquire a horse? And how can an owner identify when it's time to transition their horse into a new home? So if they are mismatched.
Wow. That's that, you know, I looked at
lumped into one.
Well, but yeah, a couple things lumped into one, and I've been thinking about this, and I'm not even sure how you can give a pithy answer, because, you know, if you buy a 2-year-old horse, your exit strategy may be 30 years down the road. And I think it's really difficult for most owners to think along those lines. Because it's such a long-term acquisition, things can happen to the horse, things can happen to the owner. It's a little easier, you know, if you're acquiring a horse, to resell it. If you're trying to have a short-term ownership, I think an exit strategy is more important. But I think most horse owners look at this as a long-term plan. Now, if the question is, how do you get out of it if it doesn't work out? That's kind of a short-term exit strategy, and that's talking to the seller and trying to getting a buyer's contract so that you have in line what's going to happen under certain circumstances. So in the short term, you can do things to try to protect yourself. In the long term, I'm not sure even how I would answer that question. Then on the second question, though, as to when's it time to transition their horse into a new home, again, that so much depends on the circumstance. Are you a racehorse owner and your horse is perpetually slow? Are you a show jumper and the show jumper's been doing really well and now he's 20? What do you do? What do you do under those circumstances? You buy a horse for your daughter who's ridden him through the junior ranks and she goes to college at 18. There's so many individual circumstances that I don't think you can give a single answer, but you can work with your group. So again, in the owner with the daughter going to college thing, perhaps someone else in the barn has a younger daughter, and this horse now is going to become a schoolmaster for another lucky kid. There's just so many individual things that I think this is a circumstance where you need to work with your veterinarian, because maybe the horse has a problem and it's best that it's time for it to go. It's time to go. Or maybe, I've had the circumstance, I pulled in my career a dozen horses off the killer trailer. I've gone to do a euthanasia and looked at the horse and say, I can help you with this, and found homes for it. So these are such individual circumstances. The only thing I can say is work with a group of people you know and trust to develop a strategy that's best for each horse.
Yes, I agree with David. This is a lot. This is a heavy question. But when I asked some of the trainers and in our organization, and they got back to me, one of the biggest things that they said was know the goal of what you want with that horse. Have a goal. We not only need a budget, but we need goals. We need to know, what do you want to accomplish? Is it going to be a backyard pet that you just go out and pet and enjoy? Are you really trying to do competition with it? And once it gets to that certain competition level, is your daughter or son now going to outgrow that horse? Literally, whereas they're just too big for it, or also in their experience level and how much better they get as they go. So many different things to think about with the goals, and having that conversation with somebody when they first get the horse is very wise. Once again, why a trainer is so good to have, because hopefully that trainer will say, okay, great. You're buying this horse that's going to be super for 4-H and is going to get your daughter or son really far in 4-H, but that's it. So if you decide now to start doing AQHA shows or APHA shows or whatever the case may be, this is not going to be the horse for you. So do you have a plan? What is your plan? And if their plan is, I don't have a plan, then hopefully that trainer can help guide that plan and say, well, I just happen to know of others that I train that might really benefit from this horse. So we could go ahead and kind of pass it along the lines a little bit like that, which is really good. I think one of the hardest things for a trainer to do, and I have had to do this numerous times, you have a new client show up. They're so excited. They just bought their new horse. You watch them just unload the horse from the trailer and you go, oh my goodness gracious, this is a bad match. They're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt, and it's a safety problem. So then you go ahead and do groundwork with the horse yourself, because any good trainer is not going to make the poor client do it. You go ahead and get on the horse yourself and you go, oh boy. And then you look at the person that's so excited with stars in their eyes that just bought this new horse, and they think this is a money grab, but you have to say, you're going to have to put the horse in training with me for at least 30 days and ride school horses of mine so that you can learn how to ride better before you can ever ride your own horse. And that's at least 30 days. And then they look at you and they go, oh, you just want the money. It's like, no, I want you to be safe. And that is a super hard thing to do. And I think as a trainer and as a riding instructor, we do it. I don't know why I disappeared.
We can
There
hear
I-
you though, Christy. You're okay.
I can hear you.
Keep talking when I disappear. Great. So I just think that's huge. And sometimes we need to, as trainers, give that really good advice and say, this horse is not for you, and go ahead and have those conversations. But if we were invited to when the person went to purchase the horse or get the horse from the adoption agency or whatever, wouldn't that be great? Because then we could tell our client, hey, client, this really isn't the horse for you. So what I tell all of my students that go to look for horses, look at 12. And they go, what? I go, I like that number. Look at 12. If you want to look at more than 12, great, but minimum 12. And you only want to hire me on your top 2, because I charge quite a bit per hour and I'm portal to portal. So you only want to pay me once you know for sure who your top 2 choices are. And then I'll come out and I'll ride like you ride. They go, you be badly? And I go, depending. right? Depending, because sometimes you get fearful, you clench, sometimes you do whatever. And I'll do that to see if that horse can accommodate that client. And I think that so this question, there's so much to it. And I also agree with what both veterinarians have said on here. Sometimes euthanasia is an option that we also have to consider as an exit strategy if all other exit strategies are not going to work, and that's a really humane exit strategy sometimes as well. And that's something we also have to consider.
So just to tag on to what both of you have mentioned, I think as people experience ownership with their horse and as time goes by, they have to understand that at some point in their life, things could happen that are going to dictate whether or not they're going to be able to keep that horse. The major reasons why we take in horses from owners here is because the owner has gotten sick or has suffered an injury. Someone in the family has died. Their finances have suffered for whatever reason, and just age. Now it's hard to tell a 25-year-old kid who is, just embarking on their first horse that, but I think as you develop this relationship with your horse and as you continue to own it, always in the back of your mind, you should be thinking, what if this happened to me? Or what if this happened to the horse? And try to have something lined up in your head about how you would react if that happens. Because eventually, and of all the people I talk to every single day, these are just common life issues that we all face and that we're all going to face at some point or could face. And so I think just having that knowledge in the back of your head, something might happen that's going to cause me to have to find this horse a new home. And I need to be ready for that mentally and emotionally. And what's that going to be? And as you were saying, David, build your network, have those people who can support you and give you ideas and suggestions, because it can catch you very unawares. And probably 80% of the owners that I talk to have been caught unaware, and they're scrambling, but at least they're reaching out to us, which is the most important thing they can do at that point. So I think just being aware that life can change. It can change very quickly or it can change very slowly, but it can change. And you just need to be thinking about what your plan would be if such and such a thing happened.
Dr. Boswell?
Yeah, one of the things I'm skipping the first question and going to the second. How to identify when it's time? But I find myself telling people that we want to live with our animals, not for our animals, and we want our animals to enhance our quality of life. And so we touched on this financially, Dr. Ramey did. If we can't pay our bills because our horse is taking more than we have, and that can be either our financial budget, our emotional budget, or our time budget, then it's time to really consider that. The training aspect of it is so tough. And I really kudos go to you, Christy, for keeping people in the saddle, because I know as I've aged, I'm not the rider I was in my 20s, and I have more fearful moments. And so, and I see that in my clients too, right? So we talk about that fear from time to time. And so knowing when it's time to transition, I think when our horses are not enhancing our lives, that's a place to start really thinking about that. Exit strategy is really tough. What I most try to avoid is having people ship a horse up the road to the auction. And I can think of one horse in this valley in particular that got pulled out of the auction, and it has been with 3 clients of mine. And so they don't all know that, but I've seen this horse repeatedly. And I'm at the place where I'm ready to say goodbye to this horse, and he just keeps moving around. And so it's pretty tough. That exit strategy, I don't want the euthanasia to be the only exit strategy for sure, but having the trainer professional, having the veterinarian professional that can help assess behavioral and medical issues when the horse, comes down in the levels or something like that is critical. So that network, again, our networks critical at the beginning of our relationship with our horses, and that network becomes critical at the end as well. So, yeah.
I think you all just managed to answer that question pretty thoroughly after saying it was such a difficult question.
It is a difficult question. There's a lot of components to it. And reading it now, I'm like, oh, maybe I should have worded it a little differently, but you did an excellent job. So thank you for that. Okay, next question. Are there certain red flags that prospective owners should listen, I should say owners or doctors, should listen or look for when thinking of acquiring a horse?
Well, I came up with two. And number one is you are going to be buying a horse from someone or getting a horse from someone. And the first red flag is make sure that the person from whom you're buying the horse should do everything they can to make you feel comfortable. There is no question they should not be willing to answer. They should let you have access to the horse, to his medical records. They should tell you everything, because it should be in the seller's interest that you acquire a horse that suits you, that serves you well, and it also serves the seller's reputation well. If you are finding that the seller is making excuses, or, well, you know, you're going to have to get it now because I have somebody else who's interested in the horse, that's a huge red flag in my view. Somebody should be working with you to make sure that you have the right horse, and should do everything in their power to do that. And the second red flag is buy the horse. You don't make excuses for the horse that you're looking for, that you're looking at. Buy the horse that you have. Don't buy the horse thinking, well, even though this horse just tried to kick me 4 times, I'm going to find a trainer that's going to turn him into a nice horse and he'll be just fine. Or, as another client of mine, and you guys just referred to, if you're 40 years old, buy the horse for your 40-year-old self, not your 20-year-old self. Okay, so get the horse that suits you. Don't make excuses for it. Spend time and work with the person that's selling you the horse. Those are the couple of red flags that I immediately thought about.
I love both of those. I think those are wonderful. So for us, when we're trainers and we're asked to come and look at a horse, first of all, sometimes the people that are wanting to buy a horse, the seller says, no, we don't allow a trainer to come on site and ride the horse ahead of time. Run away. Just run away. If they don't allow a vet to come on site, it might be sedated before you get there. So that's why they don't want the vet there. Run away. If the seller says, oh, I need a deposit ahead of time, an unrefundable deposit before I let people on my property, run away. And if they say, like what David said, oh, I got a hot prospect right on your heels, you better hurry up, run away. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of people out there that sell horses that do this. Sometimes they're desperate and they're just trying to get the horse to move on, but sometimes it's other reasons. So once again, I'm sure Karen will talk about this, but working with a reputable organization like a rehoming center and things is such a good idea. And I sat on the Harmony Equine Center, and they're part of the Colorado Denver Dumb Friends League here, and they have a program for rehoming horses, and they're part of the Right Horse program and a bunch of other things as well. And I'm sure they're also part of UHC, and they are fabulous. And part of this program was a year-long process, and for 8 hours once a month, we would get together and we would talk about, when are we going to euthanize the horse? If the horse comes on from a seized situation, when are we going to euthanize? Is there a euthanize shelter? That's what they do. So first of all, the vet was there to talk about all the vet issues. Then they had me there to represent trainer, and then they had other people there to represent other aspects of the industry. And medical stuff was one thing, but boy, we got to vices. Vices were rough. Can you really handle the rearing horse? Because what do most people do when a horse rears? They hi-ho silver, pull back on the horse, and the horse flips over and lands on top of them. So are you going to see this when you're first going to ride the horse? I don't know. But if you bring a trainer with you, a trainer knows how to apply enough pressure on that horse's face that that horse might go up with that person if they have a rearing in their background. And then that trainer can say, run away. You don't want a rearing horse. So once again, this is why we bring reputable people with us to try to do these things, because some of the vices can become huge. Pulling horses. I know I worked for a lesson barn once, and they had a couple horses that pulled back when tied. They were so super when you got the students on, we didn't worry about it. We just didn't tie them. We just looped them. Where are they going to go? Over there with their buddy? Great, loop them again. And after a couple of times, they stop, or connect them with twine. And then when they go back, they break the twine. And again, no big deal. So these things that are red flags to some people might not be to others, depending on your level of knowledge when you come in. Once again, why having a trainer and instructor with you to kind of say, this is an unusual situation, you want to stay away, versus, oh, this is a great situation, and I think that this feels good and will probably work for you.
In our neck of the woods over here, I would beware of any horse that's quote unquote free, because no horse is free. And we talk to people from time to time that are trying to rehome their horses, not necessarily turning them over here to us at the center, but trying to rehome them commercially. And I always tell them, never advertise your horse as free, because they aren't free, and you need to attach a value to your horse. And I think that, look, if you are in the process of getting a horse, whether you're buying it, adopting it, whatever, look at the circumstances that the horse is living in. And you can tell a lot about the people that are selling the horse. And kind of going to what you were saying, David, about, they should be professionally showing you the horse, giving you information, being on time, making it evident that that horse has been well cared for. And so you just have to look around at the conditions and see, what do they look like? Is this a place that you would recommend somebody else coming to? And if it is, great. If it's not, then it's probably not the right place to get your horse from. So just kind of common sense about, how is that horse acting? It's hard to be aware of whether or not the horse has been drugged, but we all know that that happens. When people are looking at horses, having a trainer with you or a friend who's a veterinarian might be helpful, because so many horses are sedated before they're actually shown to people, and that can be a problem too.
So I'm gonna divert us a little bit. I love what you guys have all said about red flags for horses that are in a buyer seller situation. I've done a lot of, I know Dr. Ramey said he has pulled horses off of the truck that he was there to euthanize and said, I can help this horse, right? And there are definitely those horses out there that end up in those situations. And we really, really want to help the horses. I mean, we're horse professionals, and we love these animals. So I'm just going to talk for a couple seconds about horses that people are getting, quote, bailing, or getting from auctions in tough situations, because I want to encourage people to be able to actually be able to help the horse. So I do, my one client in particular, and several people that I've consulted with, I really want them to be able to look at that horse's feet, because not are those feet trimmed in the last 3 years, but like, do these feet mostly match? Because if one foot is really, really tall and one foot is really, really flat, it doesn't matter if the horse is a body condition score 2 and you think you can feed it, it's probably not going to be sound. And so that's a big red flag for lameness, is what that hoof growth is like over time. I really, really want people to look, if it's possible, that the horse is a crypt orchid, because that adds a huge, huge expense on. All of the behavior things are really, really tough to assess in those situations. And I agree with everything. Just again, I agree with everything you guys have said about getting horses from good home A to good home B. But when we start looking at horses that are outside of that scenario, it's really, really tough to be able to assess their behavior and be able to assess their riding. But we do want to try to choose horses we can help. So that's my 2 cents on that too. Just wanted to add those 2 things in there.
I wanted to throw in the comment about horses being drugged. One of the things that I always encourage my clients when they're trying to buy a horse is to try the horse on multiple occasions and ideally under their control. Horses that an owner may only get to ride one time in a property can be a difficult situation if, say, the horse is, you take him away from his property and he becomes very nervous. If you have care and control over the horse, then you can make sure they're not on drugs. And reputable sellers generally don't mind those sorts of things.
Mhm.
I even advise clients, especially with expensive horses, when they're looking at expensive horses, offer the seller a short-term insurance policy. You can insure a horse for 30 days and say, look, I'll take care of the horse for 30 days. If anything happens, here's the insurance policy. That way everybody's above board, and you can, to a certain extent, you can protect against those problems.
Okay. Next question, second to last, I promise. What is the most common inquiry you get from owners as it relates to the services you provide?
Well, that's easy. Number one is how much. It's always how much is it going to cost. That's the most common. There are certainly many others, but that's by far and away the most common.
Yes, David, I had how much is it going to cost too from a trainer's perspective, but I also had what we get a lot of is what exactly are you going to do to train my horse? So what are your methods? Do you follow a particular brand name certifier method, or do you follow just overall dressage principles? Do you follow, what do you follow? And I love when those questions come, because that's somebody that's pretty informed, right? They actually understand horsemanship, and they understand that we don't just snub them to a post anymore and let them sit out in the hot sun all day, right? There's definitely, we hopefully don't call it breaking horses anymore. We call it starting horses, and there's a reason for that. So we get a lot of those questions, not only costs, but methods used in training. And we get a lot of, how long is it going to take? And unfortunately, there's been a whole lot of advertising where they actually put the clock up in the round pen and they start a horse in 30 minutes or whatever the case may be that goes on at equine expos. And they expect that, or they expect the 30-day wonder, which, as we all know as trainers, you can't necessarily do. There's a thing called weather. There's a thing called other things in your own life. There's a thing called other horses. And there's a thing called, is 30 days really right for every animal? No. Every animal is its own entity. Every animal is going to require training. Some animals come with a clean slate. They're the best to work with. Others come with not so good slate, where there's a lot of vices and other things that they've learned, bad habits through the years, that have to be taken care of before you can even start the training. So, there's no correct answer on really, how much we can answer, but how long it depends. And we get that as a riding instructor too, don't we? How long until my kid jumps? Well, I have an answer for that. When they can walk, trot, and canter on any horse I put them on, with and without one stirrup, because they're probably going to lose it, then they can jump. So that's easy, because then some kids are wonderful at it. It only takes them 60, 90 days and they're jumping little cross rails because they can do that. Others, it takes years. Others, it takes a lifetime. So it depends, right? The answer is it depends. So it's going to depend on that horse, how long. And then the other one is, what are your fees above and beyond just the training? So how much is the boarding going to cost, and those types of things. So I guess, once again, another cost one too.
So the biggest question we get is somebody will call and say, I have a horse that I can't keep anymore. What should I do? And how do you guys work? So we spend a lot of time on the phone telling people how to surrender horses, what that means. They transfer ownership from themselves to us. We don't take any horses that are pending any kind of court decision or where custody is in question, because we will only take the horse if we can own it. So we explain that to people, and we give them options. Sometimes people aren't quite ready to surrender their horses, but they're just exploring what's out there, which I appreciate those phone calls, because at least it's showing that the people are thinking ahead a little bit and it's not an emergency. I love it when I ask people, so what's your timeline? You know, does this horse need a new home in 2 weeks? Can you wait a month? And that varies. For some people, they're moving next week and the horse has to find a new home, which means they've waited way too long to call us. Or sometimes people will say, you know, I'm putting my house on the market in 2 months, so this horse needs a place in about, you know, sometime within that time period. And I love that, because generally those people are really easy to help. So we spend a lot of time just helping people understand how to surrender their horses, what that means, and how, you know, how we work and what we require. We require a Coggins, a negative Coggins certificate, and then the surrender form, which transfers ownership from them to us. And them could be animal control, the sheriff's department, law enforcement, as well as an individual. And those are the only 2 things we require. A lot of people ask, you know, do you require a donation? And absolutely not. We wouldn't get 90% of our horses if we required people to give us a donation before they surrendered them. So it's mostly the nuts and bolts of surrendering a horse, and then what happens to the horse after it gets here. So we explain that they all receive a veterinary inspection within a day or 2 of arrival. They're all assessed as far as their ground work and their riding ability is concerned. And if rehabilitation is involved, then we do that, which means that, you know, that horse is waiting a little bit before it can actually go into our training program. Then once it goes into our training program, we get it ready for adoption. So the eventual goal is adoption. And I love it when people who are surrendering horses want to know what's going to happen to the horse, because it shows that they really care about where that horse is going and they care what happens to it. It's not a huge percentage of people, but it is a percentage. And other people are just desperate and need a soft place for this horse. And we never turn away a horse that's in that type of crisis situation. So it's mostly, you know, what do you do? How do we do it? And can you help? And we try to answer all those questions.
So like Dr. Ramey said, the number one question I get is how much? But beyond that, as far as it relates to our conversation about keeping horses in homes, keeping horses in appropriate homes, if it's a horse that has had, and I'm sure you guys have all experienced this, but a horse that somebody's had for a year or 2 that now is having an issue that appears behavioral, sorting out a medical problem such as lameness or ulcers from the strictly behavioral, I developed this bad habit because you haven't been using a trainer and you should be. Sorting those things out can be really hard. And I think that's a pretty common thing that I converse with my clients about on a day-to-day basis. How much of this behavior is medical and how much of this behavior is just behavior because you let it walk all over you, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I really appreciate everything you guys have said. There's really good answers and good food for thought today. Thank you.
All right, and to wrap up our discussion for today, I have one final question. If you could summarize what it means to be a responsible owner, which is the theme of the day, from your point of view and your profession, in one sentence, it doesn't have to be a sentence, we've got time, you can go longer. What would it be?
Gee, I got it down to a sentence. You know, it took me a while, but I think it means that a responsible owner means that you are curious about and attentive to your horse's health and well-being. So you're not just a nodding head, just taking everything that everybody tells you and chasing off the next thing. You're curious about it, but you have a genuine interest in making sure that your horse is doing great. I don't think it does not mean that you have to spend a lot of money on a horse. It doesn't mean that you have to participate in competitions. It's establishing a relationship with one of the coolest animals on the planet and just making sure it's okay.
I love that. That's a hard act to follow. That was good. That was good. So I'm going to circle back to what I talked about at the beginning and having a mentor before you go down this journey, someone that you know you can bounce ideas off of and things. So I wrote a sentence. I'm going to read it. A horse is not a dog or a cat. It is a big commitment of time and resources. Make sure to know ahead of time those that can help you succeed, such as having a good veterinarian, farrier, trainer, instructor, and barn manager if you board your horse. A network around you is one of the keys to your success as a new horse owner.
So kind of tagging on to all of that, I would say that to be a responsible owner, you have to have the ability to provide for your horse's daily care and emotional needs, that you have to be tuned into what could happen and have a plan in place should your circumstances or the horse's circumstances change, and that you never, ever, ever be afraid to ask for help.
My one sentence would be that I really appreciate when people truly care about their horses in a way that means we're not hanging on selfishly or something like that, but truly care about their horses and truly want to learn. Somebody that has had horses for 2 weeks, they're in for a lifetime of learning and passion and just such joy that horses bring us. And I love when people really, really want to learn. I love when people have had horses for 30 years and they still want to learn, because there's so much out there. I still learn things every day. So just caring about our horses and wanting to learn more, those are the two things that I really, really like for responsible owners to do, because if that is what they're doing, even if they make mistakes, which I think we've probably all made mistakes on our paths, right? I mean, none of us are perfect. They'll find the right path. They'll eventually get to the information, or they'll get to that knowledge that they need. So that's what I think is always being open to learning and caring about our horses.
Stacy, I love that so much. Education is key, and we can absolutely learn every day from everyone. So when we certify instructors, we certify beginners that teach. I mean, they're brand new teachers themselves, and they're just teaching, like, let's say, walk trot at a Girl Scout camp, all the way up to people that, of course, are showing and doing a lot of really competitive things as an instructor. I normally, when I go and do certifications, I learn more from the brand new instructor who has really never taught before, who is finding new ways to teach certain things, than I do from the professional that's been doing it 40 years and just has it down to a science. And it's just, we can constantly learn, just like you said. I just love that. And that education will do nothing but improve our relationship with our horse.
Excellent. Is there anything else anyone would like to add to this discussion? This has been a great panel. I thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you all. Your time has been much appreciated.
There's been some great things in the chat. For those of you that get a chance, look in the chat. There's been some really good comments in there. Thank you for all those that have shared. It's been very interactive. I've enjoyed it.
Yes, agreed.
And just to reiterate, we are going to, this is being recorded. So our plan is to clean it up a bit and get it onto our website. And we will be sharing it with our members, who can then share it with their clients and members as well. This will go out to the basically the general public as an educational piece.
And if any of you have any questions you want to put into the chat or raise your hand and ask, we have like 10 minutes or so set aside for that. So feel free, we're happy to answer any questions anybody has out there.
I love the
Yeah.
horse council chats that are going on. That's true. A lot of our horse councils are a really good way to get information, and a lot of the horse councils do have expos. So that's super that that was put on there. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. My concern, and about one of my concerns that drives my blog and a lot of the way that I practice is that I think that the horse world can be a little overwhelming. And in my view, the horse world, many aspects of the horse world are trying to make horse ownership as complicated and as expensive as it can be. And people in general don't like to bother with things that are super complicated and super expensive. And the basics of horse ownership are not that difficult. If they get along really well without a lot of expensive feeds and stuff. It's important that horses be trained, but whether a horse does dressage or a horse is a cutting horse or a horse jumps over fences, the horse could care less. They don't have any potential. They just do what they're being asked to do. And horse owners, I think, need to try to always move back to keeping things as simple as possible. There's the old saw about attributed to Will Rogers about the outside of a horse is good for the inside of a person. And we always need to go back to that and think about just spending time with and doing some basic, simple things and keeping that joy, because if it becomes too much of a pain, people aren't going to want to do it. And so, there's just so much, there's so much they have to offer, and don't let a lot of the nonsense and noise that goes on out there get in the way of having a great relationship with an incredible animal.
Very, very well said.
Thank you.
Sorry,
reading
just
through-
reading through the chat. Yeah, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, make sure we're not missing any questions. Anybody else want to add any kind of, I know, Dr. Amy, that's a hard one to follow up with, but if anybody else wants to add any other things, otherwise, Ash, I can't remember what time we had scheduled for.
Till 4, but I think Julie has a couple of closing remarks.
Are you ready for me?
Sure. I think we probably are, yeah.
Well, great. So let me just thank everybody. The panel was wonderful. Dr. Boswell, your presentation was great. Ashley and Emily, super job with what you presented. The United Horse Coalition is an initiative of the American Horse Council Foundation. So I want to take a time to thank all the foundation trustees for their support and their encouragement with the United Horse Coalition. I also want to thank our important partners with the United Horse Coalition, which is our friends at Purina, who offer those wonderful feed coupons. Thanks out there, Carly, and our friends at Home for Every Horse. They're our partners in providing a lot of resources for rescues, and so we want to shout out to them. I also want to thank our partners at AAEP and the Foundation for the Horse and the ASPCA, who helped underwrite the Equine Welfare Data Collective. We could not do that research work without their support. So we want to say a big special thank you to them. And thanks everybody for being here this afternoon. Remember, tomorrow we start at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We're hosting our Industry Initiative Day, and we've got some great topics and speakers planned. So we hope you'll come back for that tomorrow. That's what I've got, Ashley.
All right, you're all free to go.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.